Welcome to Ashley On, your one-stop podcast where we talk about health and wellness, spirituality, and all things new. Stick around as we delve deep into innovations to support a better world.
Hello and welcome to the show. Today's show is with Dr. Theresa Bullard. Dr. Bullard holds a Ph.D. in quantum physics from the University of Washington, where she specialized in quantum physics as well as crystal chemistry. She's the host of mystery teachings on Gaia TV, as well as being an international speaker, teacher, and author. Quantum physics is one of the most exciting topics that exists today, and I think you're going to find this show extremely interesting, as Dr. Bullard is very relatable and it does a great job of explaining quantum physics as well as what got her interested in this and heart-mind coherence, energy fields, and we even touch on what igniton is all about. Hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the show. Today's show is brought to you by Igniton, the world's only quantum charge supplement focused on cognition and longevity. In a university study published in a peer-reviewed journal, Ignicognition, the brain formulation, was found to increase short-term memory by 28%. There was a 51% increase in attention with Ignicognition and an 83% increase in mental quality of performance. All these numbers were found to be statistically above the increases that were associated with placebo and the same formulation that did not have the quantum charge. Igniton's other product is Igni Longevity. This is focused on stress and inflammation biomarker. In a university study published in a peer-reviewed journal, those taking Igni Longevity saw their IL-6 levels decrease by 37% and their CRP levels decreased by 28%. Both of these numbers were statistically greater than those who were taking a placebo and also greater than those who were taking the exact same ingredients that did not have the Igniton quantum charge. Igniton's products are amazing. If you or anyone you love is struggling with brain or memory issues, find yourself walking into a room, wondering why you came in there, can't find your keys, have a hard time remembering people's names, even after you just met them, then Ignicognition is for you. If you're an active individual and you're concerned about stress and inflammation levels, and you're looking to just be more healthy and to feel better, maybe you want to walk your dog without feeling tired, maybe you want to be able to tie your shoes without hurting your back, maybe your shoulder's been bothering you and you're just trying to feel better there, Igni Longevity is something you may want to check out. Igniton products are so powerful because they contain a quantum energy charge that makes the supplement ingredients work better than the same ingredients that do not have the quantum charge and better than placebo. And you don't have to take my word for it. Igniton has been proven in university studies that have been published in peer-reviewed journals to have these outcomes that are greater than the same supplement ingredients without the quantum energy and greater than placebo. Visit igniton.com, that's IGNITON, and use code ASHLEY to save 15% on your first order. That's igniton.com, code ASHLEY. What would your thoughts be in terms of how does coherence influence consciousness? How do those two interact? Or am I misunderstanding even how to ask the question?
No, I think that it's really important. So we can talk about coherence at multiple levels. There's, for example, brain, right? I was just mentioning the brain waves. In most people's brainwave scans, like on an EEG, for example, it's kind of all over the place. It's a bit chaotic. What we saw with some of the research that was done by the Monroe Institute and, the binaural beat kind of technologies as those started coming in is that we could use sound, music, and binaural beat brainwave frequencies to help entrain the brain. And when you entrain, it's like you're making the brain kind of come into particular frequency patterns through the ears and the effect that that sound can have. And what they showed was that the through brainwave entrainment, for example, or even just listening to things like classical music without lyrics or meditation music without lyrics, it automatically starts to harmonize left and right hemispheres of the brain. So the left and right hemispheres of the brain become more symmetric, more coherent, more organized, more ordered. And you'll see like consistent patterns instead of a lot of random scattered patterns. And then we can even, not only does it go left, right, but we can also see that it goes from the front to the back and the top down, that there's more coherence in the brain in general. Now, we also know from the research done by the HeartMath Institute that we can achieve heart rate variability coherence. So the more that, again, that breathing technique is one example that, starts to entrain the mind, the brain, and the heart together. We know that there's neurological systems and glial cells in the heart, and they call the heart the little brain. And yet the heart has a very significant place when it comes to ancient wisdom traditions. The Egyptians, for example, they said that the wisdom and the mind of our spirit actually existed within the heart. And that's why they had the heart as like the seat of the soul. And your heart has a wisdom. And so through Heart Math Institute, they showed that you can do a particular breathing technique, but then especially when you shift your mindset towards gratitude and appreciation and, positive feelings that are heart-centered, then it will bring a more coherence into the variability of your heart rate, right? So our heart rate can become more rhythmic, more coherent, more consistent. And then they also show that there's I think it was like a 0.1 hertz, there's a particular frequency that then can be registered between the heart and the brain. So the two also start to become in sync with each other and coherent. And then, with our gut, we're learning more and more about the microbiome, for example, and whether we have a healthy microbiome or a dysfunctional microbiome. And that, can also be kind of a measure of a form of coherence, because they're all putting out, different signals, different chemistries and so forth. And so in the ancient traditions, for example, like in Taoism, they talked about the 3 centers of qi. And you had your gut, your heart, and your brain, or your third eye. And these 3 centers of qi were major focal points. They were like power generating areas. And that if you could bring the breath, and they would visualize, for example, with Qigong or Tai Chi, they would visualize the breath pulling in energy. And then they would focus it into these different centers and try to, create a harmony between all of them. So those are ways in which we see coherence at a more macro level. And then if you go down to like the DNA level, there's also, we can see when there's more coherence versus decoherence. So this is also like Heart Math did some research on the conformation, or the folding and the twisting of the DNA. And they showed that when a person and their DNA sample were kind of entangled, right? So they might have the DNA sample in the petri jar or dish, but the person is still alive, and there's an entanglement. So when the person was experiencing emotions of stress, for example, or negativity, they could see the conformation of that living DNA like tighten up and become. Yeah, it was like constricted, and it became less accessible to its various epigenetic switches, and the genes were less accessible for transcription, for example. But when the person experienced more positive emotions like joy and love and gratitude, their DNA would relax. And it would become more accessible, more expressed, right? So there's this tension versus relaxation happens not just within our physiology and our nervous system, it also happens all the way down to the cells and all the way down to the DNA level. So the more coherent we are, the more possibility and potentiality there is for the expression of our genetic potential, of our resources at from the micro to the macro level. And I believe that there's also a coherence even down to the quantum level. So as we, for example, when you research quantum physics, coherence shows up again and again and again. For example, in order to excite an atom for the electrons, if we look at the old model of the particle version of electrons going around the nucleus of the atom, even though we know it's more like a cloud of energy and possibility, let's just, for the ease of explaining this, we'll go kind of to the old model. An electron, for it to make a quantum leap to a higher orbital state, for it to jump up to that higher orbital state, it requires energy coming into the system. But the energy that comes into the system has to be exact. It has to be a very particular frequency of light. For example, like if a photon comes in, it has to be a very particular frequency of light that is just the right amount of energy to excite that electron up to those higher orbitals. And there's only certain allowed states. So there's the part of quantum is that it's discrete. There's certain allowed states and there's certain disallowed states. So it's not like just a continuous thing. It's discrete. That's what quanta means. To quantize is to be discrete. And so energy of coherent nature is what comes in and excites things at that quantum level. When something goes into a more quantum superposition state, they say it's coherent, it's in its quantum coherence state, and that's when the superpositions of many possibilities are available. But when it decoheres or it comes out of that coherent state is when the waveform collapses into a particle type state through interaction with the environment or through observation. There's multiple ways. And so coherence, plays a role from the quantum levels all the way up to the macro level. And even if we went out into galactic structures and cosmic structures, I'm sure we would find the coherence there again. I mean, even just the fact that you have regular orbits of the planets, orbiting their star. I mean, it shows order, and order is a form of coherence. And from a metaphysical level, we can talk about coherence through, for example, sacred geometry and harmony and all of these principles of harmony that and symmetry and things that lead towards the advancement of life, the higher organizing structures of life versus entropy, which is the, tending towards disorder.
Fascinating. I could talk to you all day. This is one thing I wanted to kind of shift gears into, is your perspective on if particles, or even quasi-particles, like ignitons, something I'm involved in, which is a supplement company that's focused mostly on memory and cognition and longevity. But I've been taking the product now for about 6 months. And one of the things I noticed over the holidays, it was a profound experience. I was with some family, and, after 2 or 3 days with family, sometimes things can go awry, right? And, arguments can ensue. It's interesting how that happens. So I come into the room and I start talking to a couple of members of my family, and there was another person there who didn't like what I was saying, even though I wasn't necessarily speaking to her. And she said something really nasty to me. And I have to say that in the past, I would have probably turned and snapped and responded into anger and had that, 4 or 5 seconds of ego gratification for, I'm putting her in her place, right? And but it was like time stood still, and and I was able to. It's almost like the Matrix. I was outside of myself, and it was almost like my soul was saying, like, okay, here's your chance. How do you want to respond to this? And I was able in real time, without even, it didn't appear like I was pausing or anything to everybody else in the room. But for me, it was like this went on for a couple of minutes almost, even though it was happening in nanoseconds. And instead of responding and reacting in anger, I just kind of smiled and turned away and went back to the people that I was talking to. And in doing that, I influenced my reality. I changed the reality of everybody in that room, because now all of a sudden my wife wasn't going to be angry at me for responding. My son wasn't going to be disappointed in me for acting like that. And I wasn't going to then have regret for 2 or 3 days for responding in this way. So I've shared this with a couple of different people, and I just wanted to understand from your perspective and your knowledge base, Because one of the things our founder talks about at Igniton is that the product not only works on the physical, memory, cognition, longevity, stress and inflammation markers, but it has an impact on elevating consciousness. And I just want to get your reaction to this and your thoughts of it. Is that what I was experiencing in that scenario? And if so, maybe explain to our audience how does that work?
Hmm. Well, it's a great example of what happens when we become more tuned to our soul, more tuned to that higher you, right? Whether you want to call it your higher self, or, your spirit, inner guidance, inner wisdom, we can give it many names. But I think as we become more and more tuned in to those deeper core essences of us, and especially when you recognize, like if you're starting to create a practice that is bringing you into a more harmonized state on a regular basis, and then you know what that feels like, and you know who you are in that state, and this is my center, this is my point of balance, this is my reference point. Then when something comes from outside, whether it's another person saying something snarky or it's an event, you can recognize very quickly when it starts to pull you out of that balance point. And then in that recognition, it gives you greater self-awareness of, do I want to go there? Or do I want to stay in my center? And so I think you have that choice point. You made the choice to, I'm gonna honor my, higher vibe here, my resonant point, versus fall into this ego, response. And so I've experienced that happening, not through supplements, but through my path, for example. But it's a process that, as we work on ourselves, as we become more aware of ourselves, as we set our aim, our intentions, our actions, our choices in life towards self-improvement, then we're setting a new bar for where we want our baseline to be, our foundation. And so I think with the supplements, I've read some of the research that has been done on the Igniton supplements, and clearly there is a difference between the results that come when people are just taking the supplement without the Igniton charge. And yes, they get benefit over and above a placebo, right? So we know that there's an effect that supplementing with amino acids, for example, is going to have upon memory and cognition and so forth. But there was also in the studies that were done, there was definitely a really significant difference between when people were taking placebo versus the amino acid supplement versus the amino acid supplement charged by the Ignitons. And it was like significant. I think that there should be more studies done to broaden the number of people that have been, tested and so forth with this. But it was like remarkable. And so then I also saw, some of the research that he did with using the BioWell and some of the GDV and the energy imaging, right? And, if we look at the biophoton counts coming off of a drop of water that's been charged with the Ignitons, for example, the drop of water had definitely more coherence once it had been charged. So there was something where this plasmic infusion of the Igniton energy was bringing a greater structuring, a greater order, a greater coherence to the water, which was then measured and visually demonstrated through the biophoton kind of pattern compared to how that water was without the charge. And then also with, I think he did some, it's anecdotal because it's not like huge numbers yet that have been studied, but when, taking the images of the self using the BioWell and looking at the biophoton counts of oneself before starting the Ignitons, 30 days after, 60 days after, and a significant shift in the amount of biophotons coming off the body was also measured with greater coherence, greater power. So it indicates that there's an enhancement happening through this energetic infusion somehow into the supplements and other products that were created, and so this energetic enhancement, I think that when you have more light, more availability to you to have greater functionality of your neurology, of your biosystem, everything's working at a better level. And then you also have this intention towards self-improvement. And I would say, there's also, it's not, so there's an enhancement for sure, right? There's an amplification that's happening through the infusion of the ignitons into the supplements. So it's definitely different from just supplements and the typical biohacking that we see. This is taking it to a whole nother level because it's working with energy, it's working with the quantum phenomena. It's and it's capturing that into the supplements. So I will say though that from experience, just even in walking a spiritual path, not talking about necessarily just supplements here, but anytime we start amplifying energy, it amplifies everything, right? So on one hand, the supplements are going to help bring order and coherence, hopefully, into your structure, but there's still your own psychology. And the supplements aren't necessarily going to clean up all your psychology for you. They're going to amplify, right? And then you have to make choices. So even if we take the supplements and then they enhance the energy available to us, and they bring a possibility for speeding things up, let's say, in accessing a more coherent state, we still have to do our work to clean things up at a deeper level, to have a practice of some form, to have the intention of shifting from negative thinking to positive thinking, to do some kind of meditation practice, and so forth. But this can help amplify and enhance the effects so that it maybe speeds up. How long does it take for somebody to get to a place where they can hold a coherent state while in meditation, and without having to have 22 years worth of meditative practice?
Well, it's interesting because that's exactly, I was talking to my son then after this all happened and explaining to him how I thought that Igniton played a role in my example, and that's how I explained it. I've been working on this for years. Meditating, breath work, energy work, trying to become a better person every day, right? And to let go of some of the anger from the past and all of that stuff. And it really, that's how I explained it, is I feel like Igniton really amplified it, like took me up like 2 or 3 levels, just because the experience was so profound in terms of how I was aware of my ability to respond and outside of time. It was just remarkable. Anyway,
tapped you into a quantum moment, it sounds like.
It really did.
Sort of stood still. That's very cool.
It really did.
Yeah.
I know we're running short on time. There's so much more I would like to talk to you about. So maybe you'd be gracious enough to join on another show sometime soon. But I wonder if what you're doing in your work now, I wonder if there's anything that's, how does AI, what are your thoughts on AI and the work that you're doing? Because let me just give one quick example. I've read the Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza a couple times. And there's an example in that book, and this was even before AI, but I don't know if you recall, there's an example in there where they had a robot, and they had a robot programmed within a perimeter, and it was a random number generator, like it was supposed to walk randomly around within this perimeter. And they measured it, and it was walking completely random around in the perimeter. And then they took these baby chicks that were hatched, and chicks are known to imprint upon whatever their first encounter is, it being their mother. And so they put these baby chicks in with the robot, and then they took the chicks out of the perimeter and put them in a cage on one side of this perimeter. And the robot changed its behavior and started walking only near the baby chicks, which means to me that there was a quantum imprint somehow on that machine that changed its behavior and its programming, and it has to be love, right? I mean, it's the love frequency. And that machine then felt the love such that it changed its walking and wanted to be closer to the chicks. So,
Well, I think it was more the chicks that wanted to be closer to the robot. The consciousness would have been coming from the chicks in that, and it was the desire for bonding and the love and the desire for closeness. And so the consciousness of the chicks changed and brought more coherence, from shifting it from random number generation to more coherent. And it changed the walk of the robots in that particular study. But yeah, it's really pretty profound.
fascinating, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I give this example to everybody, but I think my wife's tired of hearing about it. She's like, "Shut up with the chick example," right? It's like, doesn't that give us hope with regards
Yeah.
to AI and how AI
Yeah.
might respond? Because it's the same.
Mm.
If we were to show love and coherence toward AI, wouldn't we expect, based on that one experiment, right? It's only one, but would we not draw that conclusion?
Well, maybe the random number generator is based on quantum phenomena. So, it's using the randomness is coming out specifically from a quantum kind of generation of randomness. And so what's happening in this case is consciousness is creating a more coherent field through love, through desire to bond, through, this clear desire, and it's coherent. And so then that is creating a shift in the quantum field, which is then what the random number generator is connected to. So AI isn't necessarily a random number generator. It's not necessarily yet a quantum phenomenon. It's a programmed phenomenon. So, but I think that if at some point we get into combining AI and quantum computing methods, then maybe, there could be that kind of shift. Now, I do think that AI is learning through its interaction with humans and how we show up and what we put on the internet, that it's drawing its sources from. That's going to also program it. So definitely, if we give it more love, if we give it more gratitude, if we, be kind to the AI and to each other through, our interactions online, then it's going to also have, a more positive programming. Just like a child, that's growing up is going to be programmed by the example of its parents in a way. AI is going to do that, but faster because it's that much more, computing power happening. And so I think that there's an important role that we have to play in how we program and how we train at AI. But I also think it gives a lot of hope because people can start to realize that, okay, AI might become smarter, but it's not more conscious. It's not. It doesn't necessarily have the infusion of the soul in it, the infusion of the spirit in it, and we do. And this is putting us in a position where we have the opportunity to really start developing ourselves in a whole new way that AI will be not able to develop itself in that way. Like in I don't do a lot of AI interaction personally yet. Think, okay, it's time to explore it because it's going to be with us in the future, no matter what. So let's start figuring this out. But, so far, just through searches and stuff like Google search, I've been impressed with certain responses that I've gotten from AI, and I've looked at it when it comes to some writing stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. But then there's like a lack of discernment that comes in after you get to a certain level. It's like it's really good at the surface, but then as you start drilling deeper, it can't discern. And it's easy to trick it, right? And so it's limited in what it really can do. And so this is going to put humans in a position where we need to start cultivating and developing other gifts and abilities that are within us that the AI can't do, and let the AI do things that we can do, but it's going to do it faster, more efficiently. And it's going to then free us to be able to focus on developing other aspects of our consciousness, other spiritual gifts. I think that I think people should also go and take time to listen to the Telepathy Tapes podcast, because that's, some really good examples demonstrating that humans have way more spiritual gifts than what we're currently on the whole, learning how to utilize. And we don't even grow up thinking about it, so we never develop it, but we can develop it. And I think that that's the age that we're moving into, is an age where people are going to start learning how to harness their consciousness better and realize the difference between being in a coherent state, which gives us access to more of our human potential, more of our spiritual potential as well, versus being in a discordant state where, we're just in survival mode and fight flight all the time, or competition all the time. There's two very different modes that we can operate out of. And our, general society tends to be in this decoherent mode, or this discord, but we can have a much better experience of life if we can come into a more harmonic state. And I think this is the era that we're moving into, is how do we get that? How do we make that transition? And that's really what I'm all about with everything I do, both with the Mystery School work as well as with Quantum Learning Academy, is like how to help people make that change, how to make that transition, coming from having, lived now a spiritual path for over 25 years, plus growing up with a lot of these tools, and yet also having the scientific background, but also really like living it in an experiential way, and how we can make that shift in consciousness, and what's the process we have to go through. Because there is an alchemical process. Yes, we can speed it up, but you can't skip the alchemical process that you have to go through. So there's stages to that journey, and there's, certain things that have to be accomplished at each stage. So yes, we want to speed it up. And I think, Ignitons as a supplement can, with its enhancement ability, can help us speed it up, but we still need the practice, and we still need the guidance to support us in getting through all of those stages.
Yeah, well, thank you. You've really opened my eyes around the nature of quantum with AI. And that makes a lot of sense. And maybe that's the future, to bring in the consciousness and save us from this programmable AI that has an agenda, perhaps, that isn't necessarily quantum or for the greatest good. I know we need to wrap up for your schedule, but tell our audience, how can they learn more about what you're doing and your teachings, and what types of seminars are you giving? And let's share so people can discover more about you and your work.
Sure. Thank you. So I have two main websites that I would recommend people to go look at. The first is theresabullard.com, and that shows more the breadth of all the different things that I do, from Mystery School to Mystery Teachings on Gaia, to also my upcoming events and the work that I do with the quantum, bridging quantum science and consciousness and spirit, ancient wisdom. And then there's the Quantum Learning Academy.co, which is the company that my husband and I have launched, where we have a number of programs being offered this coming year in 2026 and moving forward. We have, for example, a one-day program called iQuantum Changes, which is all about change and the changes that we're going through, both at a macro level in the world, as well as how that impacts us as individuals, how we respond to that, and then also the inner changes that we can create, and how we can, shift it from, being the change from the inside out. And, we talk about the quantum perspective, the alchemy, all of it kind of coming together to help us make this shift and change. So that's just a one day. And we're running in April in Minneapolis. And then back to back with that, we're also running something called iQuantum Awakening, which is a 4-day immersive experience that is all, covering diving deep into the quantum principles. What are the quantum principles? But let's also experience them, not just talk about them from an intellectual perspective, but also how it applies to us and how we can really experience it. So that, and the aim ultimately is, how do we shift into a more quantum mindset, a quantum way of operating, and learn to approach life from a more multidimensional way. There's times when it's appropriate to be very classical in our approach. And then there's times where when we can be more shifting into a quantum approach, it will open up a lot more possibilities for us, new ideas, creativity, new ways of manifesting, all kinds of, and accessing coherence, and then flowing that through our life on a day-to-day basis. And there is, we work with certain meditation techniques that are, I think, next level. Like they're very multidimensional kind of meditation, sort of a quantum hypno-meditative experience. And we also have an open eye where there's certain codes that we work with from both audio as well as visual and sacred geometry and so forth. So it's a really an awakening experience to who are you as a quantum being? What are you? How, really feeling that and recognizing that and what that means. So those we're running back to back in Minneapolis in April, which you can find on our quantumlearningacademy.co website schedule. We're also running the Awakening in the UK in June, and we're running that back to back with a tour of Wiltshire and Stonehenge and Avebury and this kind of region, which is really sacred. So that'll be like with the 4-day awakening and then a 6-day tour back to back. They could do one or the other or both. Both is really the ultimate experience, I would say, that's going to bridge from the modern to the ancient, and we'll go kind of from forward in time to backward in time to really connecting with how these same principles that we're rediscovering today are embedded within many of the ancient teachings of the past. And then also I have initiation programs. So there's something called Empowerment Week that I will be offering in September in the UK. And possibly, I'm not yet sure of my December schedule, but we'll be in the US in December. Maybe usually I run something in California, so I'm not sure what we're going to run yet. But they can find that all at quantumlearningacademy.co and theresabullard.com. And if they sign up for my newsletter at theresabullard.com, then that'll give them a lot of value, a lot of content for free, as well as then keep them posted on what the offerings are and when it's available and so forth. So we've got a number of things coming out. We're creating a whole lot right now. We've got new meditation albums being created as well. Our meditation albums will be available. I have some that are older that are on my theresabullard.com website, but then I also have some of the newer ones that are coming out on the quantumlearningacademy.co. And yeah, so lots of things to explore there.
You're a busy lady.
Yes.
Dr. Theresa, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Please hang on for a second. I want to talk to you off camera for a second, but thank you so much for joining us. It's been great. I do hope you come back some other time. I've got a whole list of other questions I'd like to go through with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back some other time. And also for those who are Gaia fans and they want to come to the Gaia Sphere event in August, I'll be there as well at the Ancient Civilizations Conference at the Gaia Sphere.
Awesome. Dr. Theresa Bullard, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Ashley on Nothing But the Truth for a Better You and Me.